record to this computer. All right, so we have officially started. Hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to our pre-law shadow session. We are very happy to have Amelia here to speak with us today about her law journey and her career as a lawyer. For those of you watching on YouTube, hi, thank you for watching. We hope you find this very insightful and interesting. Just a reminder for, I guess, the two people that are here that the majority of the session is going to be Amelia talking about her career, but if you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat and then I can get to them after the session, or we can just wait until after and we'll have like maybe 5-10 minutes if you guys want to ask any questions. All right, so just to introduce myself, my name's Christiane and I'll be your session coordinator for tonight. I'm very pleased to have Amelia here with me and I'll pass on the virtual mic to her to introduce herself.
Hi, hello everybody here. My name is Amelia Yiu and I'm a lawyer who works, basically I have my own firm in Whitby, Ontario, and we do estate litigation and we do family law here. I also kind of like, just as a sidebar, have like a side business going, which is a thing called birch law. So it's all named after trees and it does real estate and wills and estates, but it's manned by other lawyers. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go through more of the details about who I am as we go through the questions that are being asked, and then you'll get to know me a little bit better. But basically that's a summary. Oh, and also I'm married and I have 4 kids. So that normally shocks people a little bit, but you know, choices. Those were my life choices. What are you gonna do?
All right, well, thank you for the introduction. Just admitting a few more people. All right, so I guess the first question that I have is like, if we can take it back just a little bit, I guess to your undergraduate, I know you said you did a Bachelor's of Law in Queen's University, which is great. I know a whole bunch of people who go there and it's an amazing school. But yeah, just to go back to your undergraduate, I just want to know kind of how your undergraduate experience was. What program you majored in? Is there any specific courses that, you know, you might advise us as pre-law students to take for law school? Yeah.
So I grew up in downtown Toronto, and so I went to a high school called Harvard, not Harvard, but Harvard. So during that time, I really wanted to be a journalist really badly. I really love to write, and so what I did for my undergrad was I went to Carleton University and I majored in journalism. And I actually minored in law, but the reason for that was sort of haphazard because back in the day, in order to sign up for your courses, you had to get onto this telephone system and you had to beep in like the course code that you wanted. And they would only give you like a certain like seconds to do it. And I accidentally signed up for a law course and amongst all my journalism courses, and I ended up really loving that. So I ended up minoring in law for my undergrad. So that's what I did for my undergrad.
Awesome. Yeah. I know a lot of people minor in law. I'm minoring in public law, so I guess it's the same thing. There's also people minoring in, you know, things like public policy. I know political science is a very big major that people go into, or philosophy, you know, because of like the logical thinking and whatnot. But yeah,
I think I took a lot of criminal law courses, even though I don't practice criminal now. I think I took a lot of criminal because I really enjoyed kind of the logic there, and it did help me out. So later in life, but I mean, any law course I think will be helpful, and you don't even have to do law or anything to do with law because you'll get enough of that at law school anyway. So you may as well do something you enjoy for 4 years, right?
for sure. And that's the beauty of law school, right? You could take any course. And I know people advise you, especially, you know, the admission council in law school, that to get that good GPA, you want to be taking courses that you enjoy no matter what they are, because if you enjoy it, then, you know, you're more likely to do better at it. So, yeah.
That's very true. Wise advice.
Mhm. And then I guess the next question is that, I know a lot of us are planning to go to law school very soon. Some of us are applying to law school, I guess, as soon as like the fall. And I know that means taking the LSAT, which can be a very nerve-wracking test for a lot of people. So I just wanted to know how that test was for you and what was your law school admission process like?
So, like at the time, I took a law LSAT prep course, and I think it was offered by Kaplan probably. And I studied for about 1 month total for the LSAT, but I was also working part time. And I knew like there was a couple of parameters that I knew that I would have to get a certain mark because I wanted to stay in Ontario to do my schooling. I didn't want to have to go outside of Ontario because I knew I wanted to practice in Ontario. And so, that was kind of the way that I needed to handle things. Um, so I basically took the exam, and I really, really thought that I didn't get a high enough mark. Like coming out of it, I was really upset with myself, and I really considered canceling the score. Actually, I called my mother crying, saying like, "I'm gonna cancel it. But it's horrible. Like I don't know." Like, and it turned out that so I had ended up basically eventually just letting it go, and I did get it in the 81st percentile, but that was not enough to get into either Osgood or to U of T. But I did end up getting accepted into the other Ontario law schools, and I chose Queen's.
So it was like, was U of T or Osgood like one of your top options?
Yeah, it was, but at the same time, I had gone away. Like I lived in Toronto, and I went to school in Ottawa. So I was away from my family already for 4 years during my undergrad. So I wasn't totally bummed that I had to go away again because I really enjoyed being away from my family home and things. So I didn't think it was a terrible thing. And actually, Queens turned out to be like a great school. And I really wouldn't have changed my path at all for anything now. It's just that I kind of thought, well, I can save money if I stay home and go to school. But in the long run, I don't think that the student debt was that much more because I stayed away from home. So,
Yeah, for sure. I am living at home still. I mean, now with the pandemic too, but first year I lived at home. I don't know. I guess people are different. I probably like if I have a chance to stay at home, I'll take it. But yeah, I mean, going and leaving, I guess would be a really good experience too. My next question kind of is like, was there any point in your life, or did you have any experience that kind of really pushed you to go into law where you kind of thought to yourself, yeah, I think law is something that, I really do want to do?
well, I think the seed of it really started like when I was in high school, we had to do the volunteer hours. I know that it's probably different now because when I was in high school, there was also a grade 13. So you had to complete a certain number of volunteer hours. And I got my volunteer hours at a place called Justice for Children and Youth. And that was literally the first time I ever saw a lawyer that was not a man in a black suit. Uh, this was this clinic was run by women, and they were really, really passionate about youth rights and really passionate about the justice system. And I just saw that passion, and I was like, wow, like these people are really passionate about their job. I too would like to have that passion in my job. Um, I went to journalism school because I really love to write and I really love to tell stories. And I thought that would be a great place for me. But I think that, and I had a minor in law, and I was not planning on really doing anything particularly special with it. But then in my last year of journalism school, I think it was my last year, I don't know, maybe in my second last, 9/11 happened. And so, if you don't know, it basically was a terrorist attack where planes went into the Twin Towers in New York City, and it was a very big deal at the time. And I saw the journalists cover that event. and they were really brave, and they were crying half the time, and they were like all over the place. And I just looked at that and thought, you know what, like, I can't do this. Like, I'm not going to be able to do this to the level that these guys did in this coverage. And I don't feel like, I don't know if I can do this. So I decided, you know what, there might be another career path for me. And I really liked law. So I decided to take the LSAT just to see whether or not I was going to be able to do it. So I don't think if that event, the 9/11 had happened, I probably would have still gone into journalism, even though journalism looked a lot different back then than it does now, because it's sort of a dying art now, right? So probably I'd be out of a job. So it was actually a good decision.
That's amazing. That's really interesting. The fact that that event kind of changed your path. Obviously, it was a very tragic event, but if it, it made you who you are now, I guess.
Yeah, for sure, it did. It did. It was one of like a kind of like a turning point in a way for my career, you
Mhm,
know?
for sure. That's awesome. And kind of staying on the kind of like the track of law school. Um, how was your law school experience? I mean, like I'm sure it was quite daunting. Probably nothing like what we see in movies and TV shows, nothing like Legally Blonde, Elle Woods goes to Harvard, it's law school. Probably nothing like that. But I guess, is there any kind of misconceptions about law school that you think should be addressed?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think law school is a very kind of weird place because you have all these kind of A-type personalities, and they're all thrown into the same culture. Like, you're in the same place at the same time. So you're all kind of, or we're overachieving A-type personalities, and you plucked every single one of that type of person and you put them in the same cohort. And weird things happen when you do that. First of all, some of them are extraordinarily focused on studying, when at the end of the day, the bell curve almost ensures that you are going to get a B no matter how much effort you put in, unless you're one of the top like students. And there's the other ones who like are extremely social and just very gregarious. Those tend to be the litigators of the group that are very social, and they're out there and they're really extroverts. So pub nights are really fun because they are there and stuff like that. So law school is one of those things where, if you like it, then you're going to love it. But there's probably going to be a good subsection of people who absolutely hate being at law school. So I was kind of like in the middle. I enjoyed law school because I enjoyed the learning. Of course, the thing about reading is that the readings are ridiculous. You have like entire textbooks to go through in a night that they expect. So now I just know, like, hey, read the head notes, and then like skim the case, and you'll be good in the morning. So maybe that's not the best advice, but that's what I would say.
No, I think that's pretty good advice. Someone in the chat saying LOL. I know some of us try to curve our way through in undergrad. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. But yeah, and just kind of going off of that, did you have that balance? Like, were you able to keep that balance of, your social life, but then also making sure that, you excel academically?
Well, so I would give you the advice of this. You're going to get a B probably. Okay. Like, most likely you're getting a B. So you may as well have a good time too, if you ask me. And also, part of law school is making those connections, which are going to help you out in your career. So there's a path that they're always trying to sell you, and they sell it really, really hard. And that is the Bay Street law firm gig. Okay, they sell that to you very hard because the law firms are usually sponsoring the school. They sponsor classrooms. They sponsor the chairs you're sitting on are sponsored by Bordner, Ladner, Gervais. Um, they make sponsor technology and other things like that. And they want the best of the best. They want the cream of the crop. they want to try to skim off the top. So they come to on-campus interviews and they try to take the best of the best. But that's not what law is about, right? There are all kinds of other law jobs out there other than what we call the Seven Sisters. So the big law firms out there who have like hundreds of lawyers. There's government jobs, there's working in smaller firms. And so you have to take a look at the big picture. If you are going to be the type of lawyer that you're able to build your own book, meaning get your own clients, make your own rain, and chart your own course, then you're going to need those connections and you're going to need that networking. So what's the best way to do that is to build connections in law school. That means going to the pub nights, and that means spending time with people. That might not necessarily help your academics, but it will help you in the future when you're looking for a job, when you need a case or you need a precedent, that you have someone there to call on, and someone is going to refer you files because they trust you, because they sat at a bar with you until 3 a.m. talking about, I don't know, torts. They did that with you, so they have that connection. So my advice would be go out and have a good time. Obviously, still do the work and study. And just for me, I would say attend every class. Don't miss the class. If you're that type of learner where you need to hear the information, then you should definitely be in class every time, even if it's 8:30 in the morning. Because that is how you are going to get through those 100% exams. Because don't forget, it's 100% open book. So the trick is not exactly knowing the answer. You don't have to know the answer, but you do need to know where to find the answer. And listening in class is going to help a lot.
For sure. That's really good advice, especially the connections and making sure you have that network and making sure that there's definitely that balance there in law school. Because I feel like so many people go to law school and a big misconception is that you have to study, that's it. You have to shut yourself in your room, forget about the outside world, and then pay attention to your textbooks. But it's definitely more than that. And I think connections will definitely help you in the future, like you were saying.
Well, I met my husband at law school, and I actually and I still have like friends from that I made at law school who are, refer me files regularly, and we still have chats or whatever. One of my roommate actually had two men roommates, and one of them is a criminal lawyer and the other one is a commercial leasing lawyer now. And like, if I need something, like, I'm on the phone with them and they're helping me out, like, even to this day. So, and it's been, I don't know how many years now. I don't know what to say.
That's amazing that you met your husband in law school. It's very cute. That's awesome. Um, I guess now just a little bit about your career. I know you practice estate litigation, power of attorney disputes, and family law. But is there anyone that you kind of like prefer over the other, or is there anything you don't like about a particular field?
Well, I really like estate litigation a lot, and it's a very niche field. There aren't that many people that practice it, and because of that, the bar is smaller, so we tend not to do those personal attacks that sometimes litigators do, because I know that I will be on the phone with that person, same person, on a different file in like a week's time. So there's no point in burning my bridges. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to negotiate anything. So I like that aspect of it. Although since the changes in the Insurance Act, a lot of the people who used to be personal injury lawyers and insurance litigators are turning to estate litigation because that's a source of income, and actually it's a growing field. So I get a lot of unknowns now. Like, I don't know who you are, and I don't know if you're mean or not. So I have to approach it with a little bit of a more reserved tone. So I do like that aspect. I really do not like arguing over dead people's stuff, which I do all the time. So, who got the mom's plates and, the cutlery, and it's just, I sometimes just think like, it really doesn't matter, does it? Does it matter that badly that you need me to like itemize these things? But apparently it does, and people are very bitter about it. So you try to be, as sensitive as possible. But Yeah, I like it, but my practice has changed since the beginning because when in the beginning I just really worked a lot. And now that I own my own firm and I have people working for me, I spend like 50% of my time managing the firm and managing other people. I have a couch in my office, and my associates come here to cry. And I provide the Kleenex, and that's pretty much what I do with my day these days.
Yeah, and that kind of actually leads me to my next question. I guess kind of a personal story before I ask you this. When I was in grade 8, um, I mean, I we went to like this courthouse and the lawyer, who's a dude, and he told us, he's like, for any women who want to be lawyers, don't, because you'll never have kids, you'll never have time for your family, your lives are going to be super, super busy. And I'm the type of person who wants kids and I want to raise a family. So I honestly found it a little discouraging. But it kind of just brings me to my next question. Since you were talking about what you kind of do on a day to day basis, what does a typical day in your career look like? And I know you said you have 4 kids too, which is great to hear. But yeah, what does it look like? Can you manage that? Like, can you manage that outside life with your work?
Yeah, so you know, there have been different stages in my career. So the first part of my career, I was working on Bay Street in a sort of like a boutique estate litigation firm. And I used to joke all the time that my boss should just set up a cot because I was sleeping there. Like it just literally, I worked all day and all night, all the time. And then I got pregnant with my first child. And actually, the day that I gave birth, I was in the office working. It was my husband's birthday, and he was calling me saying like, "Oh, you promised to take me out to dinner tonight, so can't you get out of work?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying." So by the time I got home, it was like 9, and I was like, "No, you know what? I promised I would take you out to dinner for your birthday, so I'm gonna do that. Like, it doesn't matter if it's 9. We're gonna go to Little India, and we'll be fine." So I took him out for his, birthday dinner. And as he was looking at the dessert menu, my water broke. And then I was like, yeah, so we can't have dessert actually, because we have to go to the hospital. And he was like, yeah, but like dessert though. I'm like, yes, but the thing is, my water broke, so we really have to go. Anyway, we went to the hospital, and I gave birth that night. But that means that I was at the office. Like I got there at 8 a.m. And then I didn't give birth until the next morning, and I was laboring. It was exhausting. Okay, it was straight up exhausting. Then I had my maternity leave, and then I tried to renegotiate my contract with my boss. And I was like, hey, so I'm going to need to do less hours, or maybe work from home, or have some flexibility. And he was like, yeah, so I can put anyone in that office, someone who would do the hours. And I was kind of like, well, like, I guess, but it's not going to be me. I can't do that. So I ended up kind of without a job for a little while. And then I negotiated an independent contractor agreement with another law firm in the beaches. And it was really great for me because I could make my own hours and, decide what files I took on. And that was a better setup for me. Like everybody's different. And that is how I kept that kind of situation for quite a few years until I decided to open up my own practice. So the question of how do you balance? Well, you have to sort of chart your own course and understand that some choices are going to have to be made. And the fact is, those law firms, they really haven't, a lot of law firms downtown haven't changed their stripes at all, and they don't make any kind of accommodations. So whether or not you're going to be welcome there, I don't know. But I can tell you that there's a lot more firms like mine that are popping out that accommodate that. Like we have all women. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to attract. We got one resume from a guy at some point, and we actually offered him the job, and he was like, "No." And I was like, "Why? We're cool girls. Like, why wouldn't you?" But anyway, so we're all women right now, and we're all in like various stages of family planning, and like what we try to do is make sure that we're the village that helps the lawyer return to practice. We'll take on her files while she's gone. We will make sure that she has files when she comes back, and no matter how many kids she decides to have or how many leaves she decides to take. So I've set up my firm like that so that that can be something that we can achieve. So I personally have a nanny, and I also have my mom living with me. So you have to understand that I'm privileged enough to have those things. And that's how I make it work. And I also have a very supportive husband, right? He is totally 50-50 with me. And you kind of have to have that in order to make it work, especially for kids, right?
Yeah, for sure. And also, thank you so much for being accommodating. I mean, I know a lot of law firms, like you said, the one where you worked at was like, no, I could easily get someone else in your position. Like, it's fine. Um, which is really, really disappointing. Because I know women who really want to have kids and want to have a family, right? Um, but I guess my next kind of question would be, what does, I guess, a typical day look like for you? um kind of start to finish, like, I guess as roughly as possible.
Well, right now, so remember, I am the partner. I'm the owner of this law firm. Okay, so this might be looking a little different when you first get started. But my typical day today, my associate is texting me. Is I wake up probably like early in the morning. I have to put all the kids on their Zoom calls, right? I have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I have a 2-year-old who's not on any Zoom calls, so don't worry about that. So I put everybody else on the Zoom calls first, and I make everybody breakfast, and I wait for the nanny to arrive. She arrives at around 9 o'clock. When 9 o'clock hits, then I get in the car and I drive to work. And then once I get to work, normally somebody has like, I go through my list of things. So right now I'm managing the associates file. So the associates have the kind of run of the file, but I have the supervisor, I supervise the files. So any letters that have to go out, I review them. Any like litigation documents that have to be filed, I review it first before it goes out. So I review all of their work and then I send my comments back to them about what I would change, etc. I also bounce off ideas. So when it comes to litigation strategy and things like that, they will ask me and I will go ahead and tell them what I think is a good idea and what isn't a good idea. And then I usually have a number of consultations. So new clients coming in, I usually sit in on with the associate team. Right now, I don't have anybody that could really do it on their own or feels comfortable doing it on their own. So I sit in with them to make sure that they're comfortable and then they're ready. Then I let the baby bird fly from the nest and do their own consultations by themselves. So I do that. I usually have a number of that. And then I usually have phone calls with people during the day that I have to take that are usually negotiations on different settlement options and things like that. And then I do make time sometimes for networking with other lawyers because as an estate litigator, I get most of my files from other lawyers like will drafters, real estate lawyers, other things like that. So that's who I'm talking to most of the day. And then when 5 o'clock hits, because I make sure that nobody in this office is in the office after 5 o'clock unless they have something to do, I trot out the door at 5 o'clock and then I go home. If there's something to be done or an associate needs me while I'm at home, then I do it at home on my cell phone. Our office is fully equipped with like all our stuff is in the cloud, so you can do it anywhere. You can be here, you can be anywhere. And I chat with them at home sometimes, over dinner or whatever to help them with their files, depending on what the situation is. Spend some time with the kids, put everybody to bed, and that's it. That's my day.
That's really interesting. Thank you for kind of laying all that out. um and I guess just to kind of get into like the nitty gritty of what you do, what does a typical client at your firm look like?
I don't really know. So our clients are very diverse, and normally it has to do. It's when I say I do estate litigation, it means that I work with people who have either will, they're doing a will challenge, so a challenge to a will saying, hey, I did not get, so the person either didn't have mental capacity to execute this will, or they were unduly influenced, someone's holding a gun to their head while they were doing this will, or they didn't understand this will, and so it's not really their true intentions, right? So there's that. I also defend against that for estate trustees as well. So it's pretty much anyone that has an issue with the will, okay, on the power of attorney side, power of attorney disputes. So many times you have someone who's incapable. Let's say your mother has Alzheimer's and you have two sisters, and they disagree about mom's care. Like, they disagree whether she should be in a long-term care home. They disagree that, she should be taken out twice on Tuesdays. Whatever the disagreement is, then I also deal with that. And I also deal with like challenges to the validity of powers of attorney. So you could be incapable to execute a power of attorney. You could be unduly influenced. So I deal with that as well. So most people are either, I don't get a whole lot of young people, although I did have a case recently with like a 21 and an 18-year-old who their dad didn't leave anything for them in the will. So there's, and mostly the estates would have to have at least 500,000 or more in it, because it wouldn't be worth fighting over unless there was money. So it's really from all walks of life. But since I'm in Whitby, I tend to get smaller estates, like not in Toronto, so I don't have multi-million-dollar estates to work with. Most people have finite resources, and we try to work with that.
Okay. Yeah. And I know you said you were in family law as well. So do you deal with like kind of custody and then divorce and things like that?
So my partner does the family law, and she oversees. So the way that our business works is that she is the caretaker, the mama bird or mama goose or whatever of all the family lawyers. So she oversees those files. But because I'm in estate litigation, I have to work on family files tangentially. But most of my family clients are either dead or they're incapacitated, right?
Mhm.
So if there are certain rules in the Family Law Act that give you rights when a person dies, and so I deal with that, like that aspect of family law. So it's pretty niche, but yes, I do some family law,
Okay.
but not custody and divorce.
Okay. That answers my question. And I know obviously if you can't speak on it, I totally understand, but are there any like specific cases that stood out to you or you found very, very interesting or that you enjoyed working on?
Yeah, sure. There's been a ton of them. Like I can say like really tangentially like what the cases are about, but I have this one case where this woman, she was living, she was divorced from her ex-husband, okay, and they had 4 kids. And ex-husband left and didn't have any contact with the kids for many years. And then she gets sick with cancer and she dies. Except during this time, she forgets to change the beneficiaries on her life insurance policies, which are pretty significant, from the ex-husband to the kids. So it's still the ex-husband, okay, named on all that. The ex-husband then says, well, she named me, so I want all the money, even though he hasn't been paying child support for, I don't know, like 10 years or something. Like he hasn't paid for 10 years. He's a total bum. Well, it's still going on right now because he refuses to give them the money, right? So these 4 kids who lost their mother, and by the way, these kids are, when I say kids, I'm talking about like under 20, right? They lost their mom. Now they're living by themselves in a house that used to be their mom's. It was a rental, by the way. She didn't own that house. And they have no money. And their father has refused to give them the insurance proceeds, even though it's totally free money. So, yeah, like there's stuff like that, which is just totally egregious, you know? Most things are more nuanced, but that one, I'm like, ugh, this guy's a jerk, you know?
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, like a big thing for me is every time I think about becoming a lawyer, I'm always like, I feel like I'm too sensitive or too emotional. Like hearing cases like that, I feel like I just like couldn't be able to do that. Like, have you ever kind of had, I don't know, a case or a certain time where like I kind of don't want to deal with this? Like it's just too much for me.
yeah, it is like really emotionally draining. So,
Mm.
it, like, I had an all day mediation the other day that was just so emotionally draining because, like, there had been abuse and, like, there was evidence of that, and I just had to deal with this all day. These 4 kids, like, I felt terrible. They were cut out of the will, and so it's emotionally draining. And then, like, I'm really trying to be strong the whole time for my clients so that they get the best deal and that I'm not falling apart. Um, that I'm surrounded by men most of the time, okay, because I'm a litigator. Like, so the mediator's a man, the lawyer for the estate trustee is a man, the lawyer for the other side is a man. So if I start crying, like that's just bad. It's just not good. You shouldn't do it. Okay. So I just try to be like really like rational and strong minded and get my clients the best deal that they can. And then I go to the car and I cry. That's like, you just go to the car and you're like, okay, so I have like, I don't know, 5 minutes to cry. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that right now. And then when the time is up, you swipe your nose and you're like, I'm ready to go. Let's go home and like try not to take any of this back home. But it is very emotional, okay? And no one should tell you any different, that it's gonna be very stressful. But I think that if you are in the right type of law and you really believe in it, because even if you're emotional about it, it means that you believe and that you're passionate about it, right? Because emotion, it's really passion disguised. And if you're passionate about something, then that means you're in the right place.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally understand that. And I mean, it's also, I guess, good to think that you're helping these people. I mean, you're helping these four kids who, are being abused and not being a part of the will. Like you're helping them. So I guess that's a good thing to think about as well, even though it could be very emotionally draining. And I applaud you for not taking that on your kids when you go home too. I mean, do your 5 minutes in the car, then wipe your tears, and then go home and just like that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you're able to do that. And I applaud any lawyer who works in criminal law or family law. It's amazing.
Well, I also think that a lot of the times they don't really recognize that you're even trying to help. So sometimes they're even embittered at you as well.
Yeah.
So, you are trying to help and that's your real feeling on the situation, but they don't recognize that as help. Like they think you can wave a magic wand and solve all their problems, but you can't, right?
Hmm. Sometimes if it's taking a long time too, a lot of people are impatient. Um, I guess it just depends on the certain case, but yeah, I totally understand. They could take their frustration out on you, which can also add to the emotional draining.
Yeah, I had this guy flip the entire boardroom table on me. I think he was like 6 foot something or whatever. I told him the boardroom table was huge too. It's not like a small boardroom table. Like I'm thinking it seats 12 or something. And I was telling him like, okay, so this is the situation. It doesn't look good for you because of X and Y. And he literally banged the boardroom table several times really loudly. And then he flipped it. And like just in time, I sort of like got up out from under the boardroom table and it flipped on me. I mean, to the credit of my managing partner at the time, I could hear him running down the stairs because we were in this old house. And he ran down the stairs as soon as he heard the boardroom table flip. And then he was like, "Are you okay?" Like to me. And then I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm okay." And then he was like, get out, they're gonna call the police." And like I was just in shock, right? So dealing with the public is not always the best. Sometimes it's bad. And I'm like 5 foot nothing. Like literally this man could kill me in an instant. So I'm just like really squirrely, as in like I was out of the way in a second, but you don't know what you're going to deal with when you're dealing with the public. The public are weird.
Hmm. You never know what you're gonna expect. I think with any case, it's could pop up and you're like, oh, okay. Or with any client, everyone's very, like you said, you deal with very diverse people. um, so I guess two more questions that I have. It's just all about, I guess, advice. If you could go back in time before you went to law school, and you were able to talk to your younger self, what advice would you give that person?
Like I would probably tell them not to get so sucked into like the whole job aspect of it. I did the on-campus interviews and I didn't get a job out of that at all. And I think I did the rounds of interviews in Toronto, and I ended up getting a summer student job at a firm called Beard Winter. And like they had this weird process, and I don't know if they have it now, but basically that you could get hired back for articling, but that you could also apply to other firms. So I applied to other firms because I wasn't sure. Like to me, I was like, well, I may as well have more eggs in my basket. So I applied to other firms while also applying to the firm that I was working at. And then they informed me that I did not get hired back, okay, by pulling me into a boardroom with like, I don't know, 8 of the partners or maybe all of the partners, all men, okay. And they said, "We're not hiring you back because you have a poor attitude. You didn't say that we were your first choice. You should have been more passionate about working for us, and you shouldn't have applied to those other firms. So we interpreted that to mean that you don't really want to be here, so that's why we're not hiring you back." Of course, I didn't actually get any other jobs, right? So then I was out of a job. So I listened to this whole speech, I don't know, for a few minutes, seemed like hours, right? And then I got escorted from that boardroom, whatever, to my desk to pick up my paltry things and put them in a box. And then I got walked to the elevator by a security guard. And I can tell you it was very devastating, that whole thing. But if I look back now, like with the benefit of hindsight, I should have realized like the big picture, which was that, yeah, okay, so that job didn't work out, right? Because they didn't see value in you. Like, I know you guys are probably not on Facebook, okay, but there's this Facebook meme that I don't know, for some reason I've seen a dozen times now. I don't know why all my family and friends are sharing this thing, but it's about like this father who wants to show their daughter about the value or something, and they're like bringing an old car to different places to get valued. So they bring this old car to like a dealer, and the dealer's like, "Yeah, I'll give you nothing for it because it's worthless." And then they bring it to a scrap yard, and they're like, "Ugh, we'll give you nothing for this thing because it's worthless." And then they end up bringing to like a car enthusiast or someone who collects these things. They're like, "Oh my god, I'm going to give you thousands of dollars for this car because this is like a rare collector's edition old car, right? And it's very sought after." So, like, the moral of the story is, I wasn't valued there. They didn't see my value in that place. But that doesn't mean that I was not worth anything. It just meant that they didn't see my value. So I was in the wrong place. So as I went to other places, other people saw what I was worth and that I was valued, right? So that would be my advice, is to try to realize that you can't place your worth in other people's eyes, but always remember, like, I do have worth. It's just that you are not recognizing it. So I need to find the right person who does recognize it.
That's great advice, especially to your younger self. Um, yeah, I mean that it could be very, very discouraging, and people can doubt their worth and doubt their value. But I think it's all about, your mindset and the places that you're in, the different types of environments. And I'm really glad that it all worked out for you and you were able to see your worth and able to see your value. And you're in a great place now. So congratulations. Um, and I guess the final question, and I know you did kind of, that would be considered advice to us too, not just your younger self. But I know many of us right now are heading into the direction of becoming lawyers. And this can be very, very exciting, but it could be very daunting. And there's a lot of anxiety behind it. It's very worrisome for some people. So if there's one piece of advice that you can give, the next generation of aspiring legal professionals who want to follow in your footsteps, what would that be?
I would say that you should try to believe in yourself, try to take the long view, because just because something goes horribly wrong today doesn't mean that there's not a reason for that. Like for the example that I gave you, I wasn't hired back as as an articling student from that firm, but after that, I was called out of the blue randomly by a guy who was like, "Oh, I totally missed the deadline for these interviews things. So, like, are you still available? Because I need to hire somebody." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm still available." And so I went to an interview, and that guy that I met that day, who did in fact hire me for an articling position, is still like my mentor to this day. Like he has helped get me so many jobs. He's been my advocate like through everything. And if I hadn't gotten that job, at Beard Winter, I wouldn't have met him, right? So like you have to look at things along the path as being like not a horrible thing, but something else is meant for you. So just to let you know. And I should tell you that I was in this really crappy relationship with this boyfriend that I was living with at the time that I first applied to law school. And I got in at U of T. And then I went to Hong Kong for a U of T, not U of T, University of Ottawa, sorry. And I was living in Ottawa and I thought I was going to stay there with this boyfriend, right? And go to University of Ottawa, and I accepted that. And then I went to Hong Kong, and then he called me and said, like, I'm in love with two people. I have such a problem. And I was like, yeah, okay, so I'm going to solve that problem for you. It's like I'm no longer an option, so whatever. And anyway, so then he didn't tell me about a letter that came that said I needed to pay a certain amount of money to keep my spot. So I lost my spot, right? And it was pretty devastating at the time, but I went to Queens in the next year. So everything is, a journey. So you should just trust the process. It's going to happen for you. Sometimes it'll take longer.
I think that's amazing advice, an amazing journey. And I really think it just reminded me of the saying that everything happens for a reason. Um, so yeah, I think that's amazing. And thank you so much for answering my questions. I think before we wrap up, we have around like 10 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to anyone who wants to ask a question. You can write it in the chat, then I can just say it, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask a question that way. Oh, someone has a question. All right. So this one's from Kaden, and they say, my question goes toward law school curriculums. I've heard that they are, in some cases, archaic. Is that true? If so, how would you suggest students push for innovation? It's a very good question.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that law school teaches you, but none of them is about how you can run a practice, right? So some of the courses are archaic, sure, and they do go back like in your first year, for example, you are required to take certain courses. So I think it's like torts, criminal, I can't remember the list, okay, but property. And some of those, the case law, because you're built on a common law system, the law that we have today is based on this cases that are like 600 years old. So what they're trying to do is teach you where that law came from and the evolution of that law. And you're probably never going to use any of that, but it's to some extent, it does help inform the decisions of today. So do I think they should just totally get rid of that learning? I don't think so, but maybe they should take some courses out and put some in that are more practical and more modern stuff about, how do you run your own practice? Like, what's a trust account? What can you put in your trust account? These kinds of things. And also with regard to how like today's lawyers run their practices. So what are the tools? Research is very important, that kind of thing. So yeah, I do agree, but how can you push for it? I don't know, because these changes are a long time coming, because these things have been this way for many, many years. And unless you raise your voice or say something, it might not change even within your time period or those 3 years that you're there, but maybe in the future.
All right. Thank you for answering that question. And Kaden, thank you for your question. Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so before I ask my question, thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience. It was very real and raw. I think a lot of the times, I guess, as students or individuals going into law school or planning to go to law school, there's so many misconceptions about law school and lawyers. And when you were outlining a lot of these answers to these questions, it seemed very real and very like at home. So thank you so much for that. My question is, when you were talking about these big law firms, what did these big law firms expect or require in terms of experience as a law student, and what types of experience should you seek, or would you recommend law students seeking to gain experience so they can put it on a resume for articling once they're done, or to work in a law firm?
Yeah, so the big law firms, they hire from summer student onwards. So that means they would hire you almost like they would be looking at you almost after first year. So there isn't a lot that you can do in terms of extracurriculars, because already you're maybe in your first year of law school, and they actually are very varied in, they always like to say that they like to see a varied experience level. So that means that your extracurriculars or the experience on your resume need not just be about law. If there's something that you're passionate about, that you like volunteering with cats or something, you know, it may just depend on the interviewer on that day, whether they find that to be interesting and a source of something to talk about. And in fact, something more varied, like you love skydiving or something, might be a better conversation getter and a better thing to distinguish yourself than just a bunch of boring old law stuff, because the law firms downtown are very interested in fit. That means fit to them means, am I cool to go with you for a drink after work, or are you going to be cool at lunch? You know, that's what they're looking for. So they don't necessarily want a law machine. However, you have to be both of those things for the big law firms, both a super interesting person and someone who's academically right on the top tier. So that means getting great marks in first year and getting great marks in second year, because all they're doing is looking at your resume with interesting things on it and your transcripts. That's the only thing you have to distinguish yourself. So putting a bunch of law stuff on there isn't going to distinguish your resume from other people, but something interesting in your background might flag them. Plus, so that's not an if or, but an and, great marks.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Definitely great advice. Yes. Does anyone else have any other questions? We have around like 3 minutes left. Yeah, Aisha, go ahead.
Hi, so I had a quick question about, well, first of all, also thank you so much for coming. And I think I was the one emailing you. And so I've been kind of watching, and it's really interesting to kind of hear more about your experience after reading up about you. And so one thing I found really interesting is that your firm is kind of all females. And, you know, as I'm sure there's a lot of like, you know, women that are watching, like especially like young girls that want to grow up and become lawyers or professionals in the legal field. And I wanted to know more about your experience as a female lawyer, and kind of, you know, if have you experienced any like, you know, misconceptions or like prejudice. I know that there's I know I've heard the stereotype of, you know, like, how are you going to be a lawyer? Because, you know, women are usually seen to be more emotional. And that's just one thing. I know there's so much more that like women in professional careers have to hear. And I just want to know more about your experience of that and kind of what you have to say about that.
Well, so I think that that definitely exists, the perception that we are a lot more emotional, and it was openly told to me at my articling job that they felt that women were too emotional to be litigators. You know, like I was really careful never to cry in their presence, but I'm a pretty tough cookie, so I was able to get through it. And I hope that the women after me don't have to go through that. I didn't have to go through a whole lot, honestly. Well, like only a fraction. And sometimes the clients themselves were the ones that were like, well, I don't want her working on my file because I don't think that she's, you know, enough of a bulldog or whatever. So it was sometimes the clients themselves like self-selecting them out of my range. And so it's hard to prove yourself. I really hope, like I see the women coming up, like the next generation as they're coming through in my associates and in the other people I meet. And I can tell you that, you know, things are changing. They aren't as bad as when I was, when I first started, where people would openly tell me things like that. I think now they don't say it as much. So my advice would be just to continue to know your worth and to take a seat at the table. Like, so, and I mean that literally, because there will be tables where they'll be full of men and you're supposed to be negotiating and they will fully not give you a seat. And that's when you have to pull up a folding chair and squeeze yourself in there and go, yeah, I belong here. So you're gonna have to talk to me, right? So that's what I find. But the women that I hire today and the litigators that are in my firm right now, they are very outspoken women. very strong-minded, and sure, they cry on my couch sometimes, but they're out there advocating for their clients and doing the best job that they can. So I would just say, yeah, you're gonna meet with some resistance, but hopefully the resistance is gonna slowly retire or die, and then the rest of them will be left and will be more like accepting.
Thank you so much for speaking about that. And I definitely agree that it is, it is slowly improving. We did hear from other female lawyers on our platform and how it was a lot worse when they were first starting law school, but that they do also see a lot of women also themselves becoming more outspoken and kind of speaking up more and not really letting themselves get upset about what other people are saying. So thank you so much for giving that advice. And I hope that other women watching and just general advice to anyone not to doubt yourself and to not let anyone else kind of bring you down as long as you know your worth and how hard you're working, I guess. So thank you so much for that.
And also being an advocate for other women too. So if you see someone getting like put down or not like getting a seat at the table, for you to speak up and be like, yeah, actually she should be here too. So move over, scooch over. Yeah, she's gonna come in here and she's gonna talk about her client's case. So, just move over. So I think that that's what you have to do too. And I've been lucky enough to have men in my life, like my mentor or whatever, who was always like, yeah, no, she's the best person for this file actually. So like, I don't care that you don't want her. You're definitely gonna have to work with her. So too bad, I'm just gonna leave the room now. Bye. So he really was a strong advocate, and I think we all have to be, right, in order for things to change.
I think that's so important. Definitely great advice, especially to all the girls out there watching. I hope you really gain something out of that. Well, I think that's pretty much it. Before I end the recording, I just want to say thank you so much, Amelia, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today. Pre-Law Shadowers, we're very honored to have you here and to answer all of our questions, and we're very, very grateful that, you were able to, I think we have one more question. I don't know if we're able to answer it just because we are running out of time. Amelia, if you do want to stay and answer it, that's totally up to you. I know we are past 5:03, or 5.
That's okay. I'll answer this one question and then I'll take off. But basically, if you're talking, the question is with regard to advice regarding personal statements, how to craft a cohesive thesis.
Sure, yeah.
So personal statements have to stand out from a standpoint of like, what is unique about you, right? So when you're crafting a thesis, you have to think about like, why do I want to be in law school, and what were the reasons that led me here, and why is that significant, and why is it different, right? So starting from the standpoint of why do I want to be here, how did I get here, that kind of thing. I think I recall was about that fateful meeting with the women of Justice for Children and Youth. And that on my first day when I was supposed to go and volunteer with her, she showed up in this beat up Honda in front of the high school, got out with these ripped jeans and like some Van Halen t-shirt. And I was like, I'm sorry, you're the lawyer that's supposed to pick me up for my volunteer? Are you sure you're not kidnapping me to some, I don't know. So that I captured that moment and I described it in my personal statement, and the story flowed from there, right? I wanted to bring that reader in. So you should try something similar to capture the reader's attention.
Thank you for answering that. I totally agree. I think personal statements should definitely be very unique and should be original, because that's what would capture, the reader. I think with every essay, they kind of tell us that. But like Joseph said, that's great advice. And once again, thank you so much, Amelia, for being here. I'm going to end the recording now. So for those watching on YouTube, thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful night.